have some. Okay, let's get started. I'll just walk you through the word. The way we're going to start is the way you use microphone. I guess I promised I wouldn't walk through. As we start, I wanted to sing this song that is the song we sang every morning, maybe 5 or 6 times as we started our worship service. And I came home and there it was in the red hymnal. I was so shocked. But when you sing it, it sounds like, I'm not going to sing it, I'll pronounce it, but it's ubi, caritas, 8, and then you go, more. Ubi, caritas, Deus, EEBS. Okay, thank you, choir, for coming. Okay, let's start this. Susan's going to play it through, then we're going to sing it together, and then she's going to drop the piano and sing the last time a cappella. Okay? Well, in June of 2019, I had the pure joy and privilege of going on what I called a pilgrimage. It was arranged by an entity, a non-profit organization in California. I just want to walk you through some of the history that we saw, the beautiful church, Chartres, and then also talk about some of the spiritual and the labyrinth focus that we had. So, okay. My buttons are not.
Just click on it. The cursor, click on the cursor on the screen. Then,
oh, okay.
yeah. Well,
never mind. Let's try again. Okay, I can do it with my mouse. Okay. This is a picture of Chartres Cathedral at night. One of the most beautiful sights, I think, as far as cathedrals go. So one thing I was inspired by was a book that Mark had called The Art of Pilgrimage. And this quote comes from there. All around the world, billions of people set out on meandering roads to make a connection with something they believe is holy and sacred. And that same book has this quote as the headings for one of its chapters. Yet the Lord pleads with you still. Ask where the good road is, the godly paths you used to walk in days of long ago. Travel there and you will find rest for your souls. So for me, you have to ask the questions, why this journey? And I guess for me, I would say spiritual hunger, which I think we all have. sometimes we get so busy, but in those quiet times, I'm always wondering, could I go deeper? Could my meditations be richer? What would make me closer to God? So far, it's been gardening. And so I was looking for something like that. And then the cacophony of the world, even before COVID, led me to desire a quieter, more meditative time in my life. And the third one's a big one for me. You know, I'm already on a journey, traveling very speedily down the track toward my final destination. You know, I know where the train's going, and my prayer life now and my spiritual life is I want to be prepared. Whatever happens, I want to be prepared to be gracious. I want to be prepared to be accepting. That's not my nature in this kind of thing. And then we'll talk about minotaurs later, but I have my own personal minotaurs that I need to confront in my life. And they change. Some of them don't go away. And then I knew most certainly that as much as I love Rick Steves, he was not going to be able to fill this need. And then you know that pilgrimages require walking. I wanted to be sure there should be no walking. We did some walking. I owe Dining for Women a great debt of gratitude. Now it's now called Together Women Rise. But I went to Dining for Women, and there I met my fellow traveler, Marilyn White Embry. At the end of Dining for Women, I made an announcement about the Women's March. She came up to me and handed her card. She had a card. She said, "We need to be friends." And you know, we have been friends, close friends, ever since. She went with Mark and I to the Women's March. She is very connected to Chartres Cathedral and Lauren Chartres. Lauren had been her mentor and teacher. She worked on her doctorate. And then Marilyn also knew of Kayleen Asbo. And here is the dearest. I kind of worked her face as I dragged that feature up there. This is the Reverend Dr. Lauren Chartres. And she is a marvel. But she was responsible for this pilgrimage. After I met Marilyn, and Marilyn told me about her, I read the book, Walking the Sacred Path, Rediscovering the Labyrinth as a Spiritual Practice. And I never got to meet her till we're on the pilgrimage. But of course, this is how great a person she is. She's got a bachelor and a master's in education. She got that from Princeton. She has a doctor of ministry degree from Andover Newton School of Theology. She is the founder of Veriditas, and if you want to go look for some of these pilgrimages, that's the site you'd go to. She's retired now, been an Episcopal priest and canon emerita at Chartres Cathedral in San Francisco. And what else do I love about her? She's a licensed family and marriage therapist. She has it all. Sadly, because she was gay, she could not serve as a priest. And she was working at Grace all those years, but she could not serve as a priest until 2009. And if you want to find her, you just simply type in laurenartres.com. Lauren's work and dedication to the labyrinth is as a healing tool. In San Francisco, Chartres Cathedral was connected in many ways to hundreds, and I would be willing to bet hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. I heard a figure of 600 at one time. I just couldn't find that figure again, but of course they lost so many. These were not always members. They were members, family, friends, and friends of the church. And so that motivated her to think, how can we help people grieve? What can we do? And then she had her own, she was kind of burned out and worn out, and she went to Chartres and she walked the labyrinth. And it gave her an insight that this could be a place where people who were grieving could find solace, and that she could find rest and renewal. In her book, she says, I began to realize the profound need we all have to connect to the spirit that enlivens us, We need that core feeling of connection to the divine to give our lives meaning and find a vision for the future. She also says all of the larger-than-life questions about our presence here on earth and what gifts we have to offer, those are spiritual questions. To seek answers to these questions is to seek a spiritual path. And so through the working with Grace Cathedral and many, many wonderful donations, in 1991, they had a carpet printed. It's a huge space in there, so this is a big labyrinth. I saw a picture of them hauling that carpet in. They said it weighed over 900 pounds. It was all rolled up. And it was used all the time. And in 1992, AIDS became the #1 cause of death for US men ages 25 to 44. So that community needed that. Soon after, it became a permanent stone labyrinth in the cathedral, and then they built an outdoor one later where people could walk anytime. More than 1 million people have walked that labyrinth since it opened. When Lauren takes people on this pilgrimage every year, it's going this year in June, and guess who is her partner? Dr. Diane Butler-Bass. It's going to be a fabulous. It's usually a 5-day experience. We flew in on Sunday, and then we were in class and meetings Monday through Friday, and we departed on Saturday. Kayleen Aswell was the other person. She wanted to get enrolled in her PhD. She has a master's in psych and music and mythology. And so she got into a doctoral program. And they said to her, well, now, we want to refine your topic style. We want you to pick one topic that we want you to focus on. She said, if that's what a PhD requires, she says, I'm not going to do it. She says, I want a little bit of everything. And she's very musical. She trained as a concert pianist. She had an accident with her hand, so she can no longer play. But she still teaches and instructs students at the conservatory in San Francisco. She is an instructor or a professor at UC Berkeley as part of their,
Sorry.
No problem.
Get back at it. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I need to use the mouse. Oh, so this will work. Okay. So anyway, this Lifelong Learning Institute is one of her loves. She also has her own nonprofit called Mythica. She's the artistic director, but she's the foundational piece behind it. And she conducts international pilgrimages. And I've looked in the past year, she's done quite a few on Hildegard von Bingen and Mary Magdalene. And her, how to reach her, just KayleenAsbo.com. So we began our journey. We left America and went over and crossed here. This is a picture. This is my plane flying out, and I happen to be on that side. And this was the 75th anniversary. I thought it was quite auspicious to recognize that. And that Thursday of that coming week would have been the day that my dad landed on Omaha Beach. I just thought I was so stunned by that way up at the tip of that landmass is where Omaha Beach is. I thought of him a lot when I was on my pilgrimage. When you leave Paris, they take us from Paris to Chartres. It's about 60 miles west and south. It's just beautiful country, low rolling hills. You might think you were in, Midwest farmland sometimes. And I stole this picture, as you can tell. I don't know how you find. But Chartres is set up so high on the hill, you can see it from such a great distance away. And you'll be riding in the bus and you'll lose track of it. It's just like Mount Rainier, and all of a sudden you'll turn, and there it will appear again. It's quite a lovely sight. And of course, it's distinctive because its two spires are completely different from each other. They're not the same height. And did you know the pilgrimage from Paris to Chartres is part of the Camino? Those are the tracings. So you can go all the way to Santiago de Compostela, but it'd be 4 to 6 weeks to get there. It did not fit my requirements. And this is what we saw along the road. Now, when we got there on Sunday, you have to remember most of the masses that were going on their pilgrimage to Chartres had finished. So this is a stock photo I found, but we saw smaller groups like this. So on the road, on the highway that we were on, there was like a frontage road, and you'd come upon these, we call them the pilgrims, of course. It was very joyful, lots of young people. And I just read an article, I think it was from the New York Times, that young people are getting more and more excited about this all the time. Usually, where did they gather? In front of Notre Dame in Paris. This is the year it had burned. So they had to start a different place. Again, 60 miles, 2 days or more. And the shell pointing the way for pilgrims is found in Chartres, pointing the way to the cathedral, and it is the same as is used in the Camino de Santiago. And here's a glorious, joyful sight when they arrive. I stole that picture too. It's been copied 6 times. It's weird. But that's the feeling you had there. That's the beauty of the church. And then it has a lot of space around it. The houses are not built up close, so you can really experience it. And here is what I think is the most beautiful cathedral in all of Europe. Our Lady, and this is Notre Dame. The only reason it's called Chartres is to distinguish it from Notre Dame in Paris. And because it's a celebratory kind of weekend, when the pilgrims arrive, all around the outside of the church, people are dressed in maybe medieval attire. They're acting as artisans and craftsmen the way they would have been when they were rebuilding the church. That metal piece that he's putting together there, you'll see that many times inside of Chartres. And then I was most fascinated over here. They showed they were making ropes. And there were blacksmiths. Here they're showing how the arches are made, what tools they used. And it was just full of people. The city of Chartres is so beautiful. It's small enough to be walkable and friendly. And they're just, that first day on Sunday, there were masses of people. Now, that all ended Sunday night. So when we started our classes on Monday morning, it was very quiet in the town. Totally different feeling. The cathedral was first final rebuild was 1194 to 260. And they say that is astonishingly fast. But people were very dedicated to it and wanted to see it happen. It's considered to be the most complete and best preserved of the Gothic cathedrals. And in World War II, they show a slide presentation or a movie on the face of Chartres later on. I'll tell you about it. And you see all the bombs that are going around during the Nazi invasion. But the Americans were coming through there and they said, there's Nazi spies up in the spires and we're going to bomb it. And one American colonel said, he was going on reconnaissance to Chartres anyway. He went into town. He checked the church, checked the spires. There were no Nazis there. So the sign was that he would ring the bells and let them know. And they did not, they could have destroyed the church. The American army might have if he hadn't helped. And his life was lost that very day as he moved on from the church. And the theme of our pilgrimage was really death and then rebirth, very much the cycle of life that we're taught through the crucifixion. And it just occurred to me when I was doing this, Chartres and Notre Dame from fire. You can't imagine how many times they've been burned and had to be rebuilt. And it's just part of the life cycle. And especially in days long ago, there were lots and lots of fires. I put this in here just as a point. Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, just to give you a point in time when the Catholic Church kind of lost their spot over there. But this was well before that. Chartres Cathedral, in 1135, a large part of the city was devastated by fire, but spared the cathedral, and that allowed for the nave to be lengthened. It's one of, I think it is the biggest, yeah. The nave is 120 feet high and 54 feet wide, the widest and most impressive of the cathedrals. And you'll see pictures of why this is so, but the large interior space is made possible because of the use of pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and external buttresses. The labyrinth is in the rear of the nave, and it's not usually covered by chairs, it's always covered by chairs. You have to get permission to use it, and I'll explain later, they do open it on Fridays. And our instructors told us many cathedrals were built with labyrinths in them, and some have been removed now.
Linda,
Yes.
do you know when the labyrinth was put into the cathedral?
I would say it was in the 1200s, yeah. Almost original to, when that, so I would say it got to its best point in about 1260, and I believe they were in there then. And here's the story of why do people take pilgrimages to Chartres? Over the centuries, it is a place for refugees. It's a place for people who need shelter and protection during war and conflict, maybe in time of famine, they could be fed. They're hospitable. And then secondly, one of the big attractions is just a spiritual pilgrimage. The Camisa Sancta, the veil of Mary. Chartres became a destination of pilgrimage when in 1876 the King of France gave the cathedral the veil of the Virgin, which came from Constantinople. I love this part, whether you believe this or not, I just love this. It's considered one of the major relics of Christ since it's touched him on his day of birth. And us Americans, right? Well, do you really believe that? Come on. And they just said to us, go and see for yourself. It's up to you to believe what you want to believe. We're not going to say. And we could go down, I believe it was down in the crypt, and there is a big altar there, and that jewel box, you could see it, it's locked up behind a lot of stuff, and then out in front there is a picture of the veil that you could see. And it's quite small, and it's quite golden with age. It still moves you. I know that sounds silly. To be in front of that, and to know that so many people make a pilgrimage there to see that. So for Chartres, they come to see the veil of the Virgin the same way the Camino goes to the grave of St. James. And the Camino's other name is the Way of St. James. That's the other name for the walk. The Camisa Sancta is considered to be one of the most precious objects in the West, saved when it burned, and for centuries locked in the gold casket. And here was our first view inside the cathedral, and it is awe-inspiring. And I want to point something out to you. It's what we've seen with Notre Dame in Paris. See how they've cleaned and brightened it? Well, people didn't like it. They got awfully scared. And so if you look over to the right, you'll see a much darker part of the church. And as we were there, it was only half done. And it had been stopped because of that controversy. People said, we do not want the change. Now, I think they've finished it, and I think it's brighter. Has anyone been there recently? But it is just beautiful. And they have some of the best preserved stained glass windows. And the one they have is this cobalt blue, which I believe you cannot use anymore. But the back of the church has the rose window, and It's incredible how well it's made. But you see those ribbed vaults, so it is bright in there. It's big and bright and white. This is my room. We stayed in what was formerly the monastery, a very reasonable price. And as you can see, there's not much in the room. There's no radio, there's no alarm. You're on your own. When you walk in the door, I think I had 3 hangers hanging, and then there were some little shelves, 3 little shelves where you could put your clothes. But let me tell you, I could get up at night and look out that window and look up the hill, and there was the cathedral, less than a block away, and lit up. I stood there a lot, just taking that in. And then Marilyn and I decided we would breakfast separately. She's not much of a morning person, but this is where the monks used to have breakfast. And I would go down, and I took a vow of silence. Can you believe it? When I went down, I just wanted to be quiet and not talk. And really, in that whole environment, there was not a lot of chit-chat, you know? You wanted to talk about something that was meaningful to you, but that meant something to me. And then here is our chapel. This is where the monks had chapel. They've redone it, of course. Simple benches. And every morning we began with Ubi Caritas. We sang that probably 7 times. And then prayer, readings, and a homily, either by Kayleen or Lauren. And these are relics from long, long ago that were in the monastery. Our rooms and the chapel were in the monastery. And I love that view. That place just had a feel when you came into it. And do you see how it's lit? There's no overhead light. There's these peripheral lights that make the room. It had a spiritual feel as soon as you came in there. Our study was of the story of the crucifixion. Life, death, rebirth was at the heart. And the extension of this story, of course, applied to our lives and our struggles. Well, after we have, quote, descended into hell in this life, can we find a way to be healed and live again? I was surprised that we had people from South Africa, from Italy, Indonesia, and many of them had suffered grievous losses, and they had not been able to get past it. There was the couple from South Africa where they were both artists, and their 19-year-old son had committed suicide a year ago. And you could see in them, they were shaken to their core. One thing that came out of it is after the conference was over, they had made a commitment. They had a large art gallery that was they had a lot of space around it. And they were determined to put a labyrinth in front, in between their buildings. And I think for anyone who wanted, but I think they needed it more than anyone. The other thing that was really beautiful is Chartres is a functioning church. They hold Mass 3 or more times a day. And so if you want to go in and participate in that, and I went in and was in one of those services and they were having communion, and I was like, well, I think I could go up there and have communion, That's not the rule anymore. And I'm thinking, and then they went up to have communion and they do it differently. They kneel and they open their mouth and the priest puts and I thought, I can't do that. So I stayed in my seat. And then Lauren, during the lecture time, Lauren talked about the labyrinth as a vehicle for meditation and healing. And then Kayleen taught stories of struggle found in history and myth. And in particular, the story, what a great story, of Theseus and Ariadne, the labyrinth and the Minotaur. And I wish I could tell it to you like she did, because it had so many nuances and so many things about true love and sacrifice. But that's all I can come up with for you. She's the genius. And then lots of quiet times for contemplation. Again, Marilyn and I made it a point. We didn't hang around together. We were on our own, and we went and did our thing, our quiet thing, because you're given so much. You have so much to think about. And this is right behind the cathedral, where this was available anytime, their own narrow labyrinth. Now, I'm bringing this up because, of course, this is what possessed me, because there's two ways, I think, to look at the labyrinth. You know, I see it as I'm going in there to face something, some struggle. And when you face it, you sort it out and then you leave it. You know, other people said they're going there to seek God and that God is at the center. And you're going in prayerfully and then you're probably leaving your anxieties and hopes with God and then coming back. Okay, let's do this again. Okay, so the Minotaur fascinated me. He was a mythical creature with the body of a man and the head and tail of a bull. In mythology, he was a fearful creature who ate the children of the god Athens. Finally, he was captured and held in the center of the labyrinth. That's the mythology. The metaphor is what I like. The metaphor represents that which we fear or need to confront. In mythology, many had died in their attempts to slay him, but finally the Minotaur was slain by Theseus, who, we all know this, don't we? He would have been lost without the thread, the little, tiny, narrow, filmy thread that Ariadne gave him to lead him. And again, I said that story is so compelling. This is actually a picture of the center, the rose center of the labyrinth at Chartres. There was a copper or bronze plaque, they believe, was at the center, and they said it depicted Theseus fighting the Minotaur. Supposedly it was removed and melted down, used for cannons. Isn't that ironic? During the beginnings of the French Republic. And then we had another experience, again, this metaphor of life to death. They were going to take us to the crypt. And people asked, well, what's that going to be like? Is there going to be a lot of bones? And they said, no, there are no dead bodies at Chartres. The crypt is a place for safety and rest for pilgrims. And they said this over and over, Chartres is for the living. I love that. Here, shelter and food was offered to all who came. It is an immense space. The crypt runs, the full length of the nave. So, and it's a giant nave. And in times of war, it provided safety and protection. And one of the most interesting things they told us is baptisms take place in the crypt. The baptismal stone fountain is up in front, really right under the altar, down below in the crypt. The newly baptized, after experiencing the darker space of the crypt, ascend to the bright light of the upper cathedral, where they are welcomed by church members, like risen, new life. I love that. And so to show us, physically what the metaphor of death to life, darkness to light means, we met outside the chapel. There was a secret door, we hadn't known about it. And that's where you get in, as all the pilgrims did, that's where you enter. And so we were taken down, there were lots of steps. And we had to be really careful because they weren't even. And then we were down in the crypt. And lit only by a few torches carried by our guides, we passed through with this shadowy, flickering light. It was so, your senses were so provoked with curiosity and a sense of kind of anticipation or anxiety. And then as we walked, it was a long walk, the history of the church and the role of the crypt were told along the way. In one part, we came to a place where, as you know, people who provide shelter always have to have a source of water. If they're surrounded by the enemy, they have to be able to have drinking water. So most places like this have a well, and there is a well there, a very deep well. And apparently, it was the Norsemen or the Swedes found it, and they threw the Christians down into the well. So I guess there are some dead bodies down there, just a few. And we just felt as if we had gone back in time and were having that same experience. It was quite striking. And then at the end of our time in the crypt, we had moved from the back of the church to the front. We were disoriented and we had become accustomed to darkness. And they said, okay, we're going to go up these stairs now. And then the stairs were not like this. The stairs were still dark. And suddenly we came up and we were standing right to the right of the altar. The staircase had led us directly to the side, and the main part of the altar was lit up. It just was an ethereal and beautiful light. And we totally had this sense of being raised up from the darkness into light. It was such an amazing feeling. It was a surprise for all of us. We didn't know how that was going to feel. And so this is kind of how it looked when we came. When we arrived over on that side, but that's what they had lit up, and we went up there and stood and looked at the altar. And I really don't understand that altar at all, but I will try to explain it. And then, now it's completely dark and late at night, and so this is the first time they let us walk out the front doors of the cathedral. You usually don't. They're always locked and you come in a side door for tourists. They opened those doors and we went out, and they started a slideshow on the face of the cathedral. And let me get that for you. It was so remarkable. And it wasn't like Disneyland. It wasn't like that. It showed the history of the church. And you could see, they would show a structure being built on how the first original church looked. And then you'd see it burn down. And then you'd see another piece of the church come up, and parts of it would burn. This church went through, as I said, the same cycle of death and rebirth and being reborn, as we all do. But it was just really an incredible experience. And then now we're coming to the end of our week. So we were going to be able to walk the labyrinth. And again, this is a picture of it from up above. The labyrinth is open for meditative walking each Friday between 10:30 and 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. And then it's open from Lent to All Saints' Day during the year. And again, I want to remind you that these labyrinths were built in other cathedrals, such as Reims, Amiens, San Quentin. I didn't know they had one up there in California. Okay. Walking the sacred path, we had only 2 opportunities to walk the labyrinth because of church schedules. And it's always covered by chairs. And there's many tourists, a lot of things going on. So on Thursday, we received special permission kind of in the afternoon to move the chairs. We got to have it for like an hour or hour and a half. But it was daylight, it was really different. But when we got to do our last one, it was late Friday evening, and we knew our time together was over. We knew this was kind of our final time together. There were candles placed around the periphery of the labyrinth, and then they brought in music. They sang these haunting Gregorian chants, and then there was cello music playing other beautiful spiritual music. And so the experience of the labyrinth, words cannot express that. I could never even try to tell you, but it was the most meaningful, wonderful way to end this. And this is kind of how it looked. And you see some shadows there. They sort of give the feeling that the labyrinth is smaller than it is, but it feels mammoth when you get on it. And the one thing about it is, as you walk the labyrinth, because you're turning and you kind of have to keep your eyes down because you've got to stay on that stone. And you will be coming around and you'll think, oh, I'm at the center now. I'm going to step on. And no, you take a turn and then you're way out on the far periphery. It's very confusing. And then sometimes when you think you're not close to the end, there you are. And it was a time full of tears. People were very moved by this, very silent. And in the center, there are those 6 rose petals. People could choose to stand in there and wait. Many of them knelt and prayed in that spot and then took their time and came out. Lauren's 3 steps are receiving. And I think to me, that means many different things. But to me, when I'm in the receiving is to receive this silence, this presence of God that I'm going into, this place that is clean of the cacophony of life. You know, I'm going into this sacred space to feel what it feels like. And then at the center, releasing fears, setting up prayers, and then returning, you have time to think. You think about the impact that it had on you, and you think it's a process. Nothing's beginning, middle, or end, but you've had an experience. So I found this quote from Joseph Campbell, and I just thought it fit this so well. And I know a lot of you know Joseph Campbell and have listened to him. He says, further, we have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all times have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find God. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outward, we will come to the center of our existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we will be with all the world. And I found this. Mark is the one who had the book, the travel book that got me started. And inside that book, one of his friends who had given him the book put this leaf. And it says, be safe and well, love, peace, courage. That's a nice way to end. So, thank you. Yes.
So when you are walking, you follow a prescribed path?
Yes, the stones. Yeah.
Okay, and my second question is, are all of them the same cathedral, or are they all imagined differently?
There is one pattern that people like that's out there, but no, they're not all the same. And you can go online and do labyrinth locator.
Oh.
And there's thousands, yeah. But this one I think is the iconic, beautiful one. And this is the one that Lauren has in Chartres Cathedral.
Oh.
But you know what I think of with our new election on board and all that? I wish I had a labyrinth in my backyard to process it because, you know, there's a lot to deal with.
There's one here in Gig Harbor, but it's just, it requires permission to go in and walk it. And I don't know what kind it is.
Where is it?
Crow Reservation or something. It's out in the Rosedale Arts.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's on.
Has anyone walked it? Has anyone?
What?
Has anyone walked it?
I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's park on Baby Bridge Island, a very small park that's open, free,
Okay.
that has a leopard. I don't know the name of the park, but I've been there. Yeah.
Our sister church on Fox Island has one. It's a backyard that overlooks the water.
Oh, very nice.
It's really nice and rarely used.
Is it big enough?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's big enough. We should take a pilgrimage there.
And there's my university place.
There's one at St. Mark's Cathedral in Seattle.
Is there really?
Oh, my.
I was recalling the final sermon of Gary Hall at All Saints Church, Pasadena, and he went from there to be the head person at the National Cathedral. His final sermon at All Saints Church, where there was a whole lot of interest in having a labyrinth, and they had one that they could put out on the floor of the parish hall. Gary said, I have a big confession to make. I don't get the labyrinth.
Yeah, some people don't.
Yeah.
Not for everyone. Not for everyone.
But, you know, maybe he hadn't had experienced the antiquity,
Yes.
and the history behind it. Well,
Yeah.
but it was quite funny.
Well, Lauren actually does labyrinth training, you know, to talk about what does it mean. And so she not only helps people who've never walked it, but then she trains people to train people. Because it is it's a learning, you know. Mark and I learned about the labyrinth when his mom and dad were in their elder years and needed care. So one of our good friends from Baybridge went out to take care of them. And then she had a lot of free time on her hands because they didn't need her all the time. She went out in the fields and she picked up cow pies. And she brought them back to our yard on the farm. And she made a labyrinth out of cow pies.
There's one at Holden.
Okay, there's one.
Yeah, you could do it in the snow.
That's really cool. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm gonna get on my labyrinth locator. I keep thinking I wanna make one at our house, but we're too up and down to really.
There's a company that makes paper patterns, all different sizes.
Okay.
So if you wanted to build one, just buy the pattern that you want
Yeah.
on paper, and then you put it on the ground, and then you put bricks in the
Oh, I love
pattern
that.
on the paper. So it's pretty easy.
Because that would be the work, to lay it out and, yeah. I think we've got room for one right over here. Don't you? Yes.
I just wanted to mention that the year after we had this cowboy labyrinth, we had a very nice garden.
It was very productive. Okay, well, yes, Phil.
I'll also say, if you have the chance to do one, if you have the option between picking a gravel one or a stone one, pick the gravel one.
Really?
Yeah, because the sound of the crunching when you walk it is just so
Yeah.
meditative and part of, very sensory. So I prefer a gravel one to a stone or wood.
That, I get that, yeah. Now, here's what I want you to do. If you know those, will you email me those places? Because I'm gonna make some visitations.
I think one of the things that is remarkable about it is it's not a maze. You don't have to keep track of where you've been or getting out. And I think I had to work through that first few times I did it, because I was like, I don't know if I can figure the way out. Do I just jump over if I can't
Yes,
figure it out?
really.
And you can release all that so that you can let your mind go elsewhere.
I think just a meditative place is what I think.
And if you can't find one or you can't walk one, you can buy those little wooden ones about the size of a large platter that are engraved, and then you just do your finger.
Oh, I've seen that, a finger maze.
She has
Ellen
that.
does that. Yeah, does that. She
Try it out
reads those. Okay. Bring it sometime so we can see it. Any other questions? Yes.
I've read that there are large stained glass windows of Mary, the
Yes.
Mother of Christ there. Are
Yes.
they in the blue that you?
The blue, yeah, the blue is everywhere in all of them, so it's just incredible, yeah. And I think there's something about that blue now that's either, can make you sick or. Pardon? Yeah, the cobalt.
Yeah, so they're there.
Yeah,
Is there something?
but they've been preserved for a long.
That's a brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, guys. I haven't had something.
I'm sure it's.
Check mine out.
Thanks, Linda. So I can read it. It was perfect. All the way through. Lily Foundation grant for my son.
I love it.
Because it's so, just click on it, it said, are you a So with that in mind, like usually have here, so we're about ready to go on sabbatical, I put together the proposal for the Lily Foundation, so we can
My
get,
senior night.
we'll see if we can get scheduled for ahead for it.
Yeah. I'm just gonna set this around.
Stop the recording.
Coming from you.
Yes.